Good afternoon. I'm WPTV Contact 5 investigative reporter Dave Bowman. Thank you for being with us on this Facebook Live. And thank you for waiting about 2 to 3 minutes, getting a little bit of a head start because of some technical glitches we got to work out. But we're ready to get going. And we have something that we think is really important and some new news and some questions about the coronavirus vaccine that can be answered. We have an expert with us to keep it in check. He is Dr. Michael Farzan. He is a chairman of Immunology and Microbiology at Scripps Research in Jupiter. Dr. Farzan, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be fun.
Hope so. Thanks for having me.
Doctor, one of the things that is really exciting news that is just coming out is you are working on developing a vaccine of your own right here in Palm Beach County, and a vaccine that is a little bit different than the other ones that we see about that many people have already received. Tell me a little bit about your vaccine, what you're working, what makes it different.
Well, the first thing to lay out maybe is the idea that when vaccine manufacturers decide to make a vaccine, they make some choices. And one is how to deliver their vaccine. And the second is what part of the virus do they want to try to mimic. And so we've been working very hard on designing the best piece of the virus to mimic. And that turns out to be a much smaller piece of the virus than what all of the current vaccine manufacturers are using. And as a consequence, by providing more versions of the piece that is very important for the immune system to see, we get a much stronger response. And there's an additional advantage, the ability of our ability to handle this protein, including our ability to dry it down, make it freeze dry, send it in the mail, for example.
And let me interrupt you on that, because that's the part that I think that is really eye-opening. The fact that this is a dry vaccine, it doesn't need refrigeration. Tell me a little bit about the advantages of that versus the vaccines that are in use right now.
Well, I don't want to over-exaggerate the utility of that, but it makes it very, very useful to provide to everyone around the world. The story I like to tell is that I FedExed this vaccine to our collaborators as a dry powder using just a regular envelope. He'll receive that, reconstitute it in sterile water, and then do his studies with it, his immunogenicity studies with it.
So we are seeing a vaccine that instead of coming in the vial, and we've all seen it on TV, where you see the needle going in, drawing some of it and giving somebody a shot. This is a powder?
Well, at the point you receive it, it will still be injected into you as a liquid. But the important part is it can be stored as a powder and delivered to people around the world as a powder, which means we don't have to worry about the cold chain. We don't have to be especially careful in its dry stage with how one handles the vaccine. And there's a very easy set of steps one can use to turn it into a liquid and then inject it into your arm.
Almost sounds like just add water and stir.
That's essentially it. Just add water, a little bit of what we call an adjuvant, and stir.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, where are you with this? How close are we to doing the testing and ultimately, if that works, when do you actually work?
So what I said was sort of important. We've got a piece of the puzzle, meaning something that somebody can use with multiple delivery systems. So the advantages of what we've designed go beyond its ability to be turned into a powder. It also means that it expresses much more from your arm than the vaccines people have been receiving right now, which means you can use less of that even for, let's say, a vaccine based on mRNA like Moderna or Pfizer, or a vaccine based on an adenovirus like the current J&J vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine. So what we have to offer is useful to all of these vaccine manufacturers. Now, a subset of those vaccine manufacturers are testing this right now, and we'll see what they come up with, and we'll see if they agree with us that it has advantages over the current vaccine. A third advantage, in addition to the idea that it expresses at much higher amounts than current vaccines, meaning you need less of it. A third useful aspect of this vaccine is it simplifies the process by which you incorporate newly emerging variants of the virus into the vaccine. And
that's all.
So that's our third point. And however, we do not have by design, we did not choose a vaccine delivery system, and we don't have a manufacturing plant. So we are partnering with vaccine manufacturers who can see the advantage of this approach.
And we have a few people checking in with us from Michigan. Welcome. We do, if you're watching right now, we encourage to have you send questions to Dr. Michael Farzan. The questions can be about this new vaccine, potentially down the road. Questions about just the vaccine and the process of trying to reduce COVID-19 in general. Obviously, Dr. Farzan's credentials speak for themselves as an expert on viruses, and we look forward to your question. Let's continue, though, with this particular breakthrough. We're already to a point where a number of people in our country are already vaccinated. If the vaccine you're working on ultimately becomes part of the overall mix, I heard you use the word worldwide, would that be to the places that are getting it less, that are a little bit slower in receiving vaccines than the United States and other countries?
Well, that would be certainly one potential way of using its strengths. The thing about many other countries of the world is they have different variants of the virus that they're coping with. So South Africa and Brazil, for example, are each coping with a variant of virus that's different from the one that the United States is facing. Those viruses are less susceptible to the current rounds of vaccines than is the virus. For example, the dominant pair-virus is really a few viruses that are circulated in the US. And as a consequence, they would be better helped by a booster shot that incorporated the sequences from the new variants even better than somebody in the US. Now, one can easily almost imagine and almost predict that there will be new variants selected to escape the current level of current vaccines that will be also emerging in the US. And over time, our current vaccines will become less and less effective because the virus has changed.
So let's get this to a bottom line. If we ultimately are to see this vaccine as part of the overall mix in fighting the coronavirus, when would we see it to market? That question, by the way, from Niels Heinrichs.
Yeah, so it could be the question for us is, when is the first human clinical trial? And that could be as easily as in months if one of the major vaccine manufacturers is persuaded that we have something useful, or it could be longer that if it takes us longer to persuade people of that.
What's the best case scenario if it makes it to the finish line? What's the best case scenario for seeing this vaccine that's being developed right here in Palm Beach County to be part of the overall strategy?
The best case scenario is we now have a way of rapidly addressing new mutations as they emerge. So
I guess what I'm asking, Doctor, is what's the best case scenario in terms of when we could actually see this in use and in the public and being used like Moderna and Pfizer, for example?
It's a funny question, because the best case scenario is actually a bad case scenario when we are being sort of shelled by new variants. So I think interest in this vaccine will accelerate as concern about immune escape becomes more prominent. Now, the concern about immune escape is very prominent in some countries. It's not yet prominent in this country, happily. But as many people get vaccinated with vaccines whose efficacy is less than 100%, they are likely to create a situation in which new vaccine-resistant variants are likely to emerge. This also will be accelerated if people don't get vaccinated. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for that. We like to change the subject a little bit and talk about the coronavirus in general. Let me get you a general look at where we are right now, both in the state of Florida and the U.S. Where do you see, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong?
Well, I think what we're doing right is getting as much vaccine to people as quickly as we can. That will absolutely save lives. So there are different vaccines, they have different properties, but all of them will save lives. All of them will keep the vaccinee out of the hospital. And that's so critical. So we want to see those death rates come way down. So that's the absolute, by far, greatest news there is. Now, one of the sort of concerns, the gray lining on the very silver cloud, is that as we distribute those vaccines, we will really create conditions by which new variants emerge. So we're going to have to play whack-a-mole for a little while between the virus and the vaccines. But even a very mutated virus will still, the current vaccines will still keep you out of the hospital with those mutated viruses. But they may not prevent those mutated viruses from transmitting, or even more mutating as we go along.
Again, one of the questions that so many people have, is this going to be a one-off, or is this going to be the kind of situation where you'd expect it's like the flu, where in the flu case we get, we're asked to get flu shots every year. Where is this going to be with COVID-19?
Well, I think it's gonna get close to the flu. Which is not a good place, by the way. That's 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 deaths a year from the flu. If we look at that, we say that's not necessary either. But our first hope when we get to the coronavirus to have those kinds of impact on the population. And yes, it will be around for a while. The virus will be around for some time, circulating, infecting people whose vaccine response has waned, infecting people with new variants whose vaccine response is less effective, or maybe infecting people who have not been vaccinated or vaccinated once when they should have twice, those kind of things. So there's two things that are almost sure. One is our death rates are going to go down, and the other is that we will have this virus and new variants of this virus coming for the next several years.
We have a question from an individual watching. An individual has several allergies and asthma and a protein 5 deficiency and has experienced blood clots. This individual's afraid to get shots. Now, I realize as a doctor, you're not seeing the entire medical chart, but given that information, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thought is I would not want to get COVID under those circumstances. In other words, propensity to blood clots, some of the other factors as you name, suggest to me that COVID will be a much more dangerous thing than any vaccine. I think that's generally true for everyone at every age. At this point, from the information that's available to us, it appears that for every age, the infection will be worse, but be far riskier than any vaccine.
And again, to those watching, we encourage your questions. If you've gotten the shot, if you want to share the experience, if you'd like to share your experiences with us, if you have questions about it, if you have questions just on how things are going, and if you have questions about your own concerns like we just talked about. But let's talk about the people not getting shots, Doctor. I mean, there is a certain amount of understanding to know that, while just about every medical professional has said, trust the science, get the vaccine, with maybe very few exceptions. The reality is it is somewhat invasive, and you're injecting something into your system. And a lot of people, most people do take that very seriously. What people that have those concerns, why it is important to get the shot, both for themselves and for herd immunity?
Yeah, I think we have to be a little honest, because I think there are a subset of us, meaning people my age, people in their 50s, even people in their 40s, for whom getting the vaccine is an absolute no-brainer because you're likely to save yourself from a lot of trouble at best. This is not a virus you want to allow to infect you. Certainly if you're older and the virus is more likely to kind of take hold and you can't get rid of it so quickly. As you're younger, I think that still holds. The difficulty with making the case here is you're also making the case not just for the individual, but for the people that surround that individual. So if you're a 25-year-old who has no obvious health problems and just feels like that's unnecessary, you're getting that vaccine mostly for the people around you. And you are getting that so that you're not a source of new variants of the virus, which can be a problem for even the vaccinated. And you're getting that so that you don't transmit that virus to other people who might have a more serious side effects with infection. So there's the sort of a dilemma on getting that vigorous 25-year-old to go ahead and take the vaccine. But I'm sure that vigorous 25-year-old has people they love who they don't want to see sick, and they want to visit them and be happy with them and all that. And I think that's why you should get the vaccine in that case.
And we have another questions from somebody dropping in on our Facebook chat. An individual saying, I have chronic pneumonia. Can I get the shot? I would add, should she get the shot?
Yeah, I better be careful that that's really an issue for your physician. So yeah, I would say that I wouldn't even want to venture on that one.
Fair to say that people with health conditions obviously should check with their physician. Yeah. I appreciate the questions coming here, but the reality is the person that knows their medical history and sees their charts and sees the ups and downs is the one that can make the call best on those things.
Yeah, I think again though, be sure to talk to your physician, but it strikes me as a situation where you'd much rather have the vaccine than have COVID.
Let's talk about the likelihood of future autoimmune diseases with, like the vaccines we're seeing in development, and a lot of what your work is all about.
But so you want to talk about autoimmune diseases as
yes.
Yeah. So
one of our Joyce Moran has suggested, and it's a great question.
It is an excellent question because you're activating the immune system, and in a very small number of events, when you activate an immune system, for a small number of people, you will activate an autoimmune response. So this became a bit of a difficulty with at least one of the vaccines that had showed up. It was the AstraZeneca vaccine that had shown, in which two individuals had elicited an autoimmune response. And the big question that was resolved, appears to have been resolved, was whether that was a normal frequency random event, whether that was a random event, except that there was the vaccination was an immune stimulus, like if you'd gotten a flu or anything else, you would have had that same immune stimulus, or whether it was actually caused by the vaccine in a way that would be worrisome. In other words, that individual would not have had that syndrome without the vaccine. I think the regulators that looked at that appeared to believe that it was one of the latter two categories, meaning that it was not the responsibility of the vaccine. But this is a continual problem. Many people, meaning a few, 1 in a million of us, but many people are prone to an autoimmune event when we have an immune event. And so when you give a lot of people a vaccine, you're going to see those autoimmune events.
Pardon me while I adjust my chair, but go ahead. Keep speaking.
Sure, go ahead. So that is the sort of the initial current concern about autoimmunity. Now, different vaccines will do this with different rates and for different reasons. but so far, I have to say that the data coming through from all the vaccines that are now available in Florida, that is the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, suggest to me that each of those will not cause on their own an autoimmune syndrome.
One of the things we would like to talk about right now, as well, is you're going to be part of a town hall meeting on Facebook Live with Palm Beach County Commissioner Greg Weiss. It will be on the County Commissioner's Facebook page, and of course, we'll provide a link to that as well. Tomorrow at 6:30. What kind of questions do you expect from the public on a seminar, an event like that?
Well, when I do this, there's a lot of worry out there. I mean, of course, vaccine safety, what the test means, if you've been affected, you get vaccinated, all of those kinds of concerns, and I think there's a lot about whether the vaccine is going to be safe or whether it's been rushed on us. And I'm a scientist working on vaccines, looking at the process, but from what I can see, this has been a very good process, and it was the rate at which it's been rolled out and the carefulness of which the 3 vaccines that are now available to us have been rolled out have been very encouraging.
So if 6 months ago, somebody said this is the way it would go, you'd say, "We'll take it." I mean,
absolutely. I'll have to sneak in a brag a bit. In April of last year, I think most of us anticipated that the vaccines would be effective because this particular virus has properties that make it very susceptible to a very conventional vaccine. It's a relatively easy virus to vaccinate against. Of course, it wasn't clear that the vaccines would be so efficacious and also so safe. And so things could have gone wrong at many steps along the way, even knowing that it was an easy virus to vaccinate against. So it's, from the point of view of vaccines, this has been a good story on what was also a very bad story.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. If you had a choice between the ones that are out there now, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, this doctor, you got to do one. What would you take?
So I think my answer would be, honestly, either of the 2 mRNA vaccines.
Which would be
Moderna and Pfizer.
Okay.
So both of these are delivered via mRNA. Both of them have about 95% effectiveness against the original strain of the virus. This means that of the vaccines that are available, I am less likely to harbor a little bit of virus that will be selected and transmitted with new variants. The J&J vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, will save lives. It's very important. If you have access to it, get it, because if you even worry for half a second about it, and it's slightly lower efficacy, you can boost that as soon as we have too much vaccine, which will be soon. And so please don't wait around for one vaccine or another. If I only had access to the J&J vaccine, as it turns out, I walk in and they're only going to give me the J&J vaccine, I'm going to take it. And what I will do is anticipate in 6 months or a year or 2 years to boost myself again with a vaccine that encodes the newer variants that have emerged in the intervening time period. So that's what I would do. I would be happily a recipient of the J&J vaccine as well as both of the mRNA vaccines, which are very effective.
One of the great questions we have here, because I think it's on a lot of people's mind, especially at this particular stage, what's the guidance on giving children without respiratory disease the vaccine? And for that matter, children with respiratory disease. But let's separate the two and talk about it.
Yeah, so that's they would be last. We have a pretty good understanding why children are less infected than adults. And the reason is quite simple. The receptor for the virus that we all carry in our upper respiratory tract and our lower respiratory tract is very poorly expressed in the lower respiratory tract of children. That means children can, to some limited extent, disseminate the virus, but they unless they have a very serious condition, are unlikely to get sick from the virus. So until again, I'm not a regulator here, and I'm not part of any clinical trial, and want to be, careful in my judgments. But the first thing to do would be to vaccinate all adults, and then potentially at-risk children with health conditions that maybe suggest they may have more serious consequences. Obesity, asthma, a number of these kinds of symptoms.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, President Biden recently said he is hoping that we can all enjoy 4th of July with our families in relatively normal circumstances. Possible? Likely? Should we be a little careful? Might the president be getting a little bit ahead of himself?
I think they said small groups. And I think that's right, because in those small groups, you will have a very clear understanding of who amongst you has been vaccinated and what the, situation of those individuals who have not been vaccinated yet. So I think that will be a very reasonable thing to do. But again, think more like a nuclear family, not a gigantic family reunion. I think that's where we might want to go. Invite grandma and grandpa, but that's about it.
We have a couple of questions that are from legitimate concerns, and I think they're raised by what we've seen with the temporary pause of the vaccine in I believe it was the Pfizer vaccine in Europe.
No, I think AstraZeneca's.
AstraZeneca. My apology, and thank you for correcting me. The AstraZeneca model in Europe that they were taken off the markets. And your thoughts on that? Was it an overreaction? Was it the right reaction? Because we really, the United States and Canada said, no, we're fine.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any reason to take any of the current vaccines off the market. AstraZeneca is not yet FDA approved.
Right.
And we have another good vaccine that is sort of in the waiting to be FDA approved that looks strong. And in Novavax vaccine, that's a protein-based vaccine. That's a very good delivery system. So I'm kind of happy that there is no AstraZeneca vaccine, even though I also suspect, or there's a reasonable probability, that the events that are halting the distribution of that vaccine right now may be accidental. But we don't know, and we have to be careful. The thing about the AstraZeneca vaccine is it's based on an unusual delivery system because it's like J&J. It's delivered with an adenovirus, but it's an unusual adenovirus. It's derived from chimpanzees, so it hasn't been tried a lot. So the other additional point of that vaccine is there's one subtle difference in the antigens between the J&J vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine that makes the J&J vaccine more effective.
Is the AstraZeneca's vaccine being tested in the United States at that point? Or
I'm certain it is, in fact.
Is it something that you would be willing, or that most people should be willing to test, just like the people who were willing to do the testing for all the other vaccines that we now have on the market?
Here I have to be a little candid with you, because I received an email from somebody who had been part of that vaccine trial, and she described herself as having been prone to vaccine envy. And I like that very much. And my thought was, I kind of agree with her that I would be a little envious of other people's vaccines if I had received that particular vaccine. But also not to worry, because a boost is a beautiful thing. So you can take any vaccine and boost it and get an extremely good response out of that once you boost it. So having had one vaccine, whatever that vaccine is, and if you give a second boost, even with a completely different delivery system, you get a much stronger immune response. It's the joy of the immune response. So not to worry too much, but honestly, if my niece came to me, I would say avoid the AstraZeneca vaccine for now, if presuming that the other vaccines are or will soon be available to you.
Would you be willing to be a test subject for it, though? And do you think people should have any hesitancy about being test subjects for that?
Well, the only difficulty with that is that when you go to apply for another vaccine, you have to more or less confess to it.
Okay.
And again, so far, simply on efficacy, never mind the safety, the probably unlikely to be serious safety concerns. Just on efficacy, it is probably less desirable than certainly the 2 mRNA vaccines.
We are out of time. Thank you so much for making the time for us, and especially, again, to recap, some pretty exciting research you're doing at Scripps, talking about your own development of a potential vaccine that isn't going to need refrigeration, and the fact that that can help a great deal in the long run if it does get picked up by a manufacturer, tested and approved.
Right.
That's terrific news. It's kind of cool that it's happening right here, right in our own backyard. I appreciate that.
I hope so.
And again, you'll also be taking questions and hearing from people via a Zoom meeting with Palm Beach County Commissioner Greg Weiss, who will have a town meeting tomorrow night via Zoom at 6:30. We're going to provide you the details and the links on this shortly, so that if anybody wants to continue or to learn something about how their neighbors are feeling and others, and get more information from yourself, you can go to that particular Zoom town meeting tomorrow night, and it begins at 6:30 p.m. And again, it's via Zoom. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Farzan, and all the best and good luck on your development of this new vaccine. It sounds both exciting and something that can potentially save a lot of lives.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day.